There are very few genres or subgenres that one can point to a single instance therein that in turn acts as the progenitor to everything that follows. Obviously, from a strictly literal standpoint, this isn't true, everything has to start somewhere, but oftentimes people instead attribute multiple titles as being the foundations for the genre. Sometimes this is the result of these titles being known as when the genre truly came into its own. Blizzard, for all of its faults and genuine problems, is also responsible for both situations. They effectively created an entire subgenre of game with Diablo and arguably perfected it around 4 years later with the truly iconic Diablo 2, and, some would argue, took a large step back with Diablo 3. Now, Diablo 2 is what I grew up with. It, alongside StarCraft, City of Heroes, and Final Fantasy X, made up the 4 cornerstones of my gaming youth. It's a game series I hold dear to my heart, despite the fact that I don't actually know too much about it, especially in terms of its lore, because I was always more focused on the loot and the monster murder that the games are known for. Diablo was originally released December 31st, 1996, less than a week before I was born. It was developed by Blizzard, most specifically Blizzard North, and was released on PC and Mac as well as the PS1. I'm not sure if this was something similar to StarCraft's release on the Nintendo 64, but I've heard that it's a lesser port regardless. It would be re-released with updates for use on modern PCs via a deal between Blizzard and GOG in 2019, and this release, which I'm going to use as the basis for this review, also includes the unofficial official Hellfire expansion. Here's a brief history lesson for you. Davidson and Associates, the parent company to Blizzard at the time, permitted Synergistic Software to develop Hellfire and Sierra Online to publish it. This was despite the protests from Blizzard, though Blizzard North would set restrictions on the development, all while still at the time working on Diablo 2. So an unofficial official expansion. I'm not sure if their annoyance with Hellfire's production helped cause them to deny multiplayer via Battle.net at least, but I'm sure that probably didn't help. Interestingly, there would be some features from this expansion that would be grandfathered into Diablo 2. These include the ability to jog, and I'll go past that terribly slow running speed, and the ability to highlight items on the ground, albeit with a spell in Hellfire's case. Now, I haven't played Hellfire to the same degree I have any Diablo game. I felt it'd be against the spirit of the review to take into consideration an aspect of the game that the developers themselves neither made nor to this day seem to approve of, especially because this is more so a review of the start of a series, and Hellfire isn't generally considered to be a part of it. From what I've seen though, it's a fine enough expansion and the screenshots seem to showcase an almost Lovecraftian vibe as opposed to Diablo's gothic aesthetic, and I'm all for Lovecraft. Diablo starts out simply enough. Your home of Tristram has seen better days. Apparently, demons and creatures have overtaken the nearby cathedral and have been flowing out of it. No one really seems to know how or why, or at least some aren't telling you, but it is clear that it needs stopped. It's here that one of the first aspects of the game presents itself in the form of this well. This game has quests, but you're not likely to see every single quest in a single playthrough. One of the more immediately obvious ones you might come across is signified by the color of the water in the well at the center of the village. If it looks like water, you don't have that quest. If it doesn't look like water, you've got it. That's right, this game has quests that might or might not appear when you play, though there are some that will always appear regardless. Some of these are kind of bull, if I'm being honest. I think anyone who plays this game should come across the Butcher and his stun-locking goodness, or I guess technically badness. He did live up to his namesake with the other townsfolk. On the plus side, if you've, launched a new game and want the Tainted Well that badly, you can start an entirely new game straight from the pause menu. That's what I did. I wanted to showcase the Butcher after all, and his maimed friend wasn't in front of the cathedral at first, so escape, left click, there he is. This is just a nice feature to have, and it makes the most sense being in this entry of the series because Diablo is short, like really short. It's one of the shortest games I have ever played, clocking in at a total of 9 hours. This is because the game has an entire 16 floors of its singular dungeon to its name, and some occasional one-offs that depend on the quest you get. Despite how short it is, it still feels like a long game because, damn, it's slow. You'll spend a not insignificant amount of time walking. Just walking, and this issue is only compounded by the fact that some enemies are just the worst. In later floors, you might come across a ranged enemy who can teleport, and since your walking speed is so goddamn slow, by the time you reach them, they'll A, have hit you with an attack of their own, and B, still had time to teleport away again. And then the pathing can be annoying. I lost count of how many times my character walked over acid on the ground when there's a perfectly clear path to where I want them to go. Weird pathing and slow movement make up 2 corners of the annoying bullshit triangle that Diablo houses. The third, of course, being animation locking or stun locking. What's likely to be your first real experience with this is the Butcher, a quest boss that can and will kick your ass if you're not prepared, or even if you are prepared. It's here that I truly discovered the importance of animations. For example, A scroll of healing, as well as the healing spell, has an animation that when interrupted negates the healing. While it thankfully doesn't use the scroll in that scenario, the potions of health and full health are largely better simply because their effects are instant and have no animations tied to them. This will not save you though, unless you're very well stocked and very well prepared. Doubly, attacks can be interrupted and thereby negated before the attack animation finishes. You'll note I had to specify when the animation finishes and not when the attack connects. This is because Diablo also uses a hit chance to determine whether or not an attack actually lands, and just like animation locking, annoys me to no end. It can turn any one-on-one fight into a slog, which says a lot for a game that's already as slow as it is, not to mention how it feels when you come across a monster closet. Sure, you can effectively turn the doorways of these monster closets into a death funnel, but if you're unlucky and your RNG says you miss, they'll just slip right past you. And it doesn't make that combat any faster, it just makes it on your terms. Then there's those teleporting assholes again, because even if you can catch up to them before they teleport their cowardly asses away, there's no guarantee that you'll land the attack and make the slow walk towards them worth it. This doesn't help my wrist and the left click until it dies motif that this game garners. I digress. Even though the butcher here is a boss you reach on the second floor, a lot of guides recommend dealing with him after you've gained about 5 levels. For reference, I beat the game at level 25, which means the guide suggests dealing with him after gaining potentially an entire 5th of where you will eventually be by the end. He isn't a pushover. All this together makes him one of the most memorable bosses in the entire trilogy, to the point where there's a variant of him acting as the final boss of Act 1 in Diablo 3. To combat this heinous foe, you gotta make an important choice: your class. The first, and the one showcased here, is the warrior. He's a very hands-on melee character. He boasts the highest possible strength stat and also comes with a repair skill, which is very quickly not at all useful. It restores the durability on equipment at the cost of lowering its maximum durability. No, you never, don't do that. That's my professional advice. The second is the rogue, best at range and admittedly the fastest class available. She acts as a kind of middle ground between the warrior and sorcerer. She's got potentially the highest dexterity, which, if you're curious, influences your hit chance as well as, in the rogue's case, damage, and comes with the ability to disarm traps. There are traps, by the way, but I've never had a single problem with any of them in the entire time that I've played this game, so I'm gonna chalk that skill up as being also useless. The third and last is the sorcerer. As you might expect, they're experts when it comes to magic and are very dangerous when it comes to late game. He eventually has the highest magic stat, surprising no one, and comes with the ability to recharge stabs. Just like item repair, it's not useful for the same reason. When you use it, it lowers the maximum charge for the staff. You've got Griswold and Adria in town for both item repair and staff recharge respectively, so these skills are kinda pointless. I don't know why they're there. Maybe if you're in a really desperate situation, I don't get it. Technically speaking, the only really distinguishable thing that makes these classes any different from each other is how their attributes scale. All classes can use any magic or equipment as long as their stats allow it, meaning that you could have a sorcerer with some heavy-ass armor, or a rogue slicing and dicing with a big-ass axe. But each class has their own maximum amounts of each respective attribute, so if you really want to go all in for a specific playstyle, you should keep that in mind. The slicing and dicing in Monster Madness is complemented by a stellar soundtrack. Seriously, Diablo's music, being as limited as it is, I think there's just like 5 or 6 tracks in the entire game, is still great. Tristram's theme is likely my favorite, but it's really hard to go wrong with any of them. There's also the voice acting, which, unlike the music, is very hit or miss. I mean, you've got the stellar voice work for Cain, which is iconic across the entire series, but then there's Adria, not as good. Of course, there's also the visual elements, how things appear. The sprite work is good, even for its time, and the environments are cool to look at. The dungeon is split into multiple zones, each with their own theming and layout styles, and it's cool when you first enter them. But due to how slow the game feels, this can unfortunately get old pretty quickly. To partially make up for this, each new zone also comes with both new enemies and a rise in difficulty. There's also a descriptor on the bottom of the screen that showcases enemy details when you mouse over them, provided you've killed enough of that enemy type. Altogether, Diablo is very much a product of its time, a relic of an era that lacks some of the changes that have been made to both the genre it effectively founded and to games as a whole. Taken for what it is, it's an interesting look into how things used to be, but as a result, it's hard to recommend getting and playing it. It's cool to say you've played simply because of what it did. That doesn't change the fact that it's a slow game with mechanics that are detrimental even for the time that it came out. I'd say get it only if its old school flair seems appealing to you, because it isn't necessary for what came after, and oof, what came after. Story out.